Let's go back to an earlier period, to the earliest gospel that we have that talks about Jesus, to see whether it has a similar view of Jesus or not. The earliest gospel we have in the New Testament is the Gospel of Mark. This is not a debated point. Well, it's always, everything's debatable, but almost nobody debates this. You will not have a Greer symposium on whether Mark was the first gospel. It was the first gospel. What was Mark's view of Jesus? Mark has a very interesting and compelling view of Jesus. Among other things, Mark certainly thinks that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. Mark's gospel begins by saying that it is the gospel of the Messiah, of Jesus the Messiah, and throughout the gospel Jesus is called the Son of God. It's very interesting, though, who knows that Jesus is the Son of God in the Gospel of Mark? Now, I'm not talking about what John says or what Luke says or what Matthew says. I'm thinking Mark wrote his gospel, and if somebody read his gospel, what would they think about Jesus? Well, they'd think he was the Son of God. But who in the narrative of Mark knows that Jesus is the Son of God? The interesting thing about Mark, again, this is common knowledge. This is nothing weird to me. And you'll see it yourself if you just read Mark's gospel. The strangest thing about Mark's gospel is that nobody can figure out who Jesus is. Nobody can figure out who he is. The reader knows who he is because Mark tells you he's the Son of God. And you read the gospel, you realize he's doing all these miracles. He's the Son of God. But nobody in the story knows that he's the Son of God. The first 8 chapters are all about people not figuring it out. Jesus' family in Mark chapter 3 thinks that Jesus has gone out of his mind, and they come to take him out of the public view. Mark chapter 3, his family, his mother and his brothers and sisters think that he's gone crazy. The people in his hometown can't understand how Jesus can deliver such teachings. Isn't he the carpenter? His 4 brothers are here with us. His sisters, how does he know all of this? They can't figure out who he is. The Jewish leaders don't know who Jesus is. They don't think he's the Son of God. They think he does miracles because he's possessed by the devil. He has Beelzebub within him. That's why he can cast out demons. And even Jesus' own disciples can't figure out who he is. Chapter 6 of Mark tells us they did not understand. Chapter 8 of Mark, Jesus asks them, do you not yet understand? No, the answer is the disciples can't figure out who he is. And then comes a key moment in Mark's gospel, halfway through the narrative. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he asks them, who do people say that I am? And the disciples say, well, some say that you're John the Baptist, come back from the dead. Some say you're Elijah, the great prophet, or one of the other prophets. And Jesus says, well, who do you say that I am? And Peter replies, you are the Messiah. Now, you think, okay, finally, 8 chapters in, halfway through the gospel, somebody's figured it out. He's the Messiah. Peter got it right? Yeah, kind of. Right after Peter says that, the next verse, Jesus starts teaching that he, the Son of Man, must go to Jerusalem to be rejected by the scribes and elders and be executed, and that in 3 days he'll rise from the dead. And how does Peter respond, the one who just told him he's the Messiah? Peter rebukes him. No, Lord, that's not going to happen to you. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan, for you are thinking of the things of humans, not the things of God. Peter understands that Jesus is the Messiah, but he doesn't understand what that means. He appears to think that Jesus is the Messiah in the sense that Jews would have expected a Messiah to be. A great king and warrior who drives out the enemy and sets up God's kingdom in Jerusalem. A powerful figure who will destroy the enemy. And Jesus is saying, the enemy is going to destroy me. Peter doesn't understand that Jesus is the suffering Messiah. Mark's gospel is about how Jesus can be the Messiah if he suffers and dies. For Mark, Jesus has to suffer and die. He is the Messiah because he's the suffering Messiah.